Hey guys, John Singleton here, head coach of the program, and I am here in Mallorca, Spain at CrossFit C23, and as you can see I have laid out a selection of machines for today's video. What we're going to be looking at in today's video is how to set up the machine in order to get out your optimal performance. What we're not doing is looking at the specific technique for each machine, but purely the setup. And actually, one thing that's important to note is that if I set up my machine optimally with the same technique, with the same fitness level, I can get a better result out of each machine just by going through the things that we are going to be looking at in the video today. So if you're enjoying the content, please hit that like, please hit the subscribe button, and we will keep bringing you more content each week. So, to introduce you to the machines, I'm sure all of you are aware of this. We have our Skierg, we have two rowers, I'll explain that in a little bit. We have our Concept 2 bike, the latest addition to the Concept 2 line. We also have the Assault bike, which all CrossFitters I'm sure are aware. We're going to start on probably the most utilised machine, which is the indoor rower. And we're going to start with what we call our damper setting. Now, a lot of people, this is the most commonly adjusted part of the rower. It controls the, in essence, the flywheel, which then we're going to look at later is how that correlates into our PM monitor or the performance monitor. So let me just explain a little briefly. As you can see here on both dampers, I've currently got them set at 10. With 10, that allows the most air into the flywheel. As soon as I start taking this number down, I reduce the amount of air that can come in and therefore reduce the resistance. So one thing that's important to note is that not all dampers are created equal. And what I mean by that is if I were to take this rower up to say 2,000 meters, that actually, because of the changes in the air, that will even have an effect on the resistance of the flywheel and therefore the setup of the rower. Also, if you've got a dirty rower, that's going to perform very differently to a clean rower because of the amount of air that can come in and out. So what we need to do is actually correlate my damper setting with what's known as the drag factor on the monitor. And this is the first part of the setup that I'm going to show you now. So I hop onto the machine, and all I'm going to do, I go onto menu, more options, and everyone will be able to see this. I can display my drag factor. So now I'm going to start to row, and we're going to see what a damper setting 10 correlates with a drag factor on this rower. And in order to calculate the drag factor, the intensity of your rowing doesn't affect it. So you can just go through normal strokes and you can test it out yourselves. Go more intense and you'll see how the number won't change. So this row we have 141 on a damper of 10. Here, it's ready to row. More options, display drag factor. And so now here, I'm at 153, 154. And so I'm actually got a drag factor of the same damper that is 13 higher than the two machines. And this means that with the same technique, same fitness level, I'm actually going to get different results on the two rowers because of this setup. Now, what we're going to recommend is various levels of drag factor for different types of people. So if you're a lighter female, you should be having a drag factor around 120. If you're a heavier male, you should be having a drag factor of somewhere around 130. Obviously you can play around with this, but these are great starting points. Lighter female 120, heavier male 130. So I'm just going to look at this now on the two machines and see if I can get to 130 on each. So I'm going to take this one down. We're going to try the high end of 8 on the damper and see where this takes me. Okay, so I'm 120, 129, so I'm close. Just going to give it a little tap, see if I can get it a bit more. You see it's only little adjustments at this end. Let's see where we are. Okay, 129 still. Okay, so in essence on this rower, I am at the high end of 8 to get 130. If I come onto this row now we know that the 10 was a high resistance, so I'm probably going to have to go a bit lower. I'm putting this on 7, and we'll see where this takes us. $128, $129. So you guys see we're probably a little off, just a slight nudge up would take us to 130. Now, so you can see actually the damper settings in order to get the drag factor are very different on the two machines. And this is really important to note. As I say, we're going to recommend for heavier guys at 130, lighter girls at 120. And it's important that you set a machine before you start your workouts, especially if you're doing a competition or a workout that's very significant. The next number we're going to look at is what we call 7% battery. We need to place that one. Let me hop on the other machine just to show you this. So we're going to hop onto here. Now if I go onto just row, you'll see lots of different numbers depending on the display and also how it's correlated if you're going for distance, for watts, for calories. There's one number that always appears through here. We have this number in the top right, in the bottom left, and it says SM. This is our strokes per minute. And what this refers to is very simply, if I'm going long, slow strokes, my strokes per minute is obviously going to be less. If I'm going short, high strokes, my strokes per minute is obviously going to be more. Now, this is an important number to be aware of on the monitor, and the big thing about the rower and also the Skierg that's very different to the bike is that this strokes per minute doesn't necessarily correlate to the intensity. Because I have continuous pressure on the flywheel on the bike, but I don't have it on the rower, the strokes per minute that we have are very different between bike and ski, between row and ski and the bike. Now again, what we're going to do is put a recommendation for most people. Now this time, the bigger, heavier athlete should have a lower, or typically has a lower strokes per minute, and then the lighter athlete typically has a higher strokes per minute. What that means is that the range we recommend is for the bigger athlete, say 22 strokes per minute, and the lighter athlete at around 30 strokes per minute. So these numbers are used to try and get the most optimal performance out of the machine, and that is aimed at getting you the best results in your workouts. Now, an analogy we sometimes use for CrossFitters, because it helps to understand a little bit more, is kind of the power output. So say I have 1 minute of max snatches. In that time, I have a 20 kilo bar, a 40 kilo bar, and a 100 kilo bar. And on these 3 bars, on the 20 kilo bar I get 20 reps. Also on the 40 kilo bar I get 20 reps, but however on the 100 kilo bar I only get 1 rep. So if we were to correlate that as our power output, we would have 200 kilos, 400 kilos, and just 100 kilos. And in essence, this kind of a higher drag factor relates to the same, meaning that, with the 20 kilo barbell, it was just so light that I couldn't get enough reps. The 100 kilo barbell was so heavy that I could only just get 1 rep, whereas with the 40 kilo barbell, that resistance was the optimal amount so I could get the most power. And in essence, that's what we're doing with the drag factor, is trying to find that optimal resistance so I can get the most power. So this is our rower, and what we are going to be doing now is moving on to our Skierg. Obviously, it's not downhill skiing, but for Nordic skiing or cross-country skiing that this is relating to. And having tried cross-country skiing, I can tell you that is maybe not cross-country is maybe not as easy as the erg dictates. However, moving on. So what we're looking at now is how we set up the machine optimally so I can get the most performance out of it, despite my technique or despite my fitness level. So the most important number we're going to be looking at for this setup is, as we saw on the rower, the strokes per minute. And what I want to achieve on this is actually a higher strokes per minute than I had on the rower. So on the rower we were recommending between 22 and 30, and on the Skierg we're going to be recommending between 35 and 45. A bigger athlete holding the 35, a lighter athlete holding the 45. And what I'm then going to use is the damper setting in order to get to that optimal level. So I'm just going to pull a few strokes now. As you can see, I've got the damper set up at 8. I'm going to see where we get to. Okay, so I'm at around 1,000 calories per hour. I've got a stroke rate of 39, which probably isn't too bad for me. However, I prefer to be a little lighter on this, so I'm going to try and take it towards, if I can get to the 45 strokes per minute. I'm going to take the damper down to around between 5 and 6 and see how that starts to correlate with a similar level of effort. So I'm going to hop on the machine. So now, right, so I start to talk, but as you can see, I'm a slightly higher strokes. I'm about 5 strokes a minute higher. We start to become at now 1,100 calories with what I describe as similar effort, with a reduction in the damper setting. So it's a big misconception that the kind of higher the damper, the quicker I can go. Obviously, starts to depend on the workout. If you're in a big sprint workout, then the higher damper setting may be the way. But for the majority of CrossFit workouts, I'm trying to find on the Skierg a difference between 35 or a stroke rate per minute of 35 and 45 is going to be optimal for you guys. Looking at our final machines, I brought out the assault bike just to show you, but we also obviously have our Concept 2 bike where the setup is important. Now, with the bike, with the assault bike, I'm really left with no options. There's no resistance I can change. The only thing I can do is kind of change my positioning on the seat. But other than that, I'm left with no options. And so in essence, the higher, in here what's termed as kind of the RPM, the higher RPM I have, the more intense, the more calories I can get, the further distance I can go. And it really is that simple with the bike. So the quicker I go, the more distance, the more calories I produce. As we saw on the rower, that is not necessarily true. I can have an extremely high strokes per minute, but I'm not necessarily going to go anywhere. So we get a direct correlation between the RPM and kind of the effort, not sorry, the effort, but the distance or the calories. And the same is true on the Concept 2 bike. However, on the Concept 2 bike, I have some options of what I can do. And the best way to look at the bike is looking at it like a gearing system. So obviously, the higher the damper, the harder the gear, the lower the damper, the easier the gear. And I want to get that same correlation going through. So we have a difference on the bike. It's the same monitor, except you can see here it's displaying RPM. So it's not strokes per minute, but RPM, revolutions per minute. And it's an important distinction because the same with the Bikerg, as you can see, I'm continuously putting pressure. When I'm cycling, I'm continuously putting pressure. There's no off time. And this is why you can get such high intensity on the rower compared to the other two, because there's no let off, there's no rest period. When you're recovering on the row, you have that slight rest. When you're recovering on the ski, you have that slight rest. There's nowhere to rest on the bike because you're putting continuous motion onto the pedals, which goes into the flywheel. So again, the number we are going to use here to help correlate that effort is the RPM. So as you can see, right now, if I were to just get into a bit more comfortable position, I start to pedal. I'm up to now 80 RPM. Now this might feel quick for some people, however this is, as a ballpark to go to, this is the RPM I would hold or recommend most people to hold throughout most workouts. Now obviously, like a gearing system, you know, if I take this the damper to 10, you know, all of a sudden it starts to mimic, say, going up a hill, or, you know, wind behind me, going down a hill, and very little resistance. And for cycling workouts or training cycling, these things may be important. However, throughout CrossFit workouts, we want to try and get the most optimal power output. In order to do that, we're going to recommend an RPM of 80. So if I hop on the bike and I start to pedal now, I see I'm at, say, 85. I can take that resistance slightly higher in order to hold that 80. Now, a bigger, stronger athlete will obviously be able to hold a higher damper. A smaller athlete will have to go down in order to correlate it to the 80 RPM. So, we have our bikes, we have our rowers, and we have our Skierg. How we set up the machines is crucial to getting the best performance out of them. I hope you enjoyed the videos. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. We'll get in touch and we'll be seeing you guys soon.